life, since I was 5 years old. Started fishing with my dad on Black Bay, rent a boat at Shay Shay. So then as I got older, I started collecting fish. That fish was from 1986. That's a real fish mount. That one and the northern are both real fish mounts. The northern was done by Bob Noonschwander here in town. The walleye was done down south, Alexandria way. And all the other fish are all catch and release, fiberglass, graphite reproductions. The biggest one that everybody always likes to look at is a lake trout that I caught on Victoria Island, which is a big island off the northern end of the Canadian continent. All of those fish were caught standing in waders and casting offshore. So we actually caught that fish in about 30 feet of water, standing in waders up to about here, and took about 15 minutes to reel it in. And when it was all tired out, it came up and grounded itself right on the rocks. Came up like on this river. We're usually fishing tributaries that are a combination of salt water and fresh water, called brackish. And the fish are able to come out of salt water and go into fresh water back and forth. So we'd stand along these edges and the fish are moving back and forth from, this is big water, ocean, salt water, and then it's inland into a river that's pouring out this way and mixing with the salt water. It's really interesting country. I've never been to Alaska. I've only gone to the high Arctic on the Canadian side. For the map, when you see it, the northern edge of Canada used to be the Northwest Territories, but in 1999 they renamed all of that to Nunavut and Nunavut, north of Quebec. So I've spent most of my time in Nunavut and Northwest Territories, Great Bear Lake, and some of those areas. So the big lake trout, that was fun. The grayling, I always thought that was this real big, mysterious Arctic fish, and that was I call it the sunfish of the north. There's millions of them. When you get into a little river where there's grayling, they're just, those little fins are all over the place, and that's what makes big fat lake trout, is they eat those. We did try eating a grayling for shore lunch, but it's very oily. We did it on a barbecue grill, and it was okay, but I'm glad the lake trout like eating them, because I don't. And then Arctic char, they thought, in the old days, they thought that the Arctic char was just a mixture of lake trout and ocean salmon, but it's actually its own species. So the Arctic char is a form of salmon, but they don't, when they spawn, they go back out into the ocean. And these fish can live for 30, 40 years. They spawn, then they go back out in the salt water for a year, take a year, eat shrimp, all of that, and then they come back up and spawn again. So the Arctic char, and that's a really good eating fish. You can take an Atlantic salmon that you buy at the store and a piece of Arctic char and put them side by side, and the salmon looks like it's been soaking in water for 2 days. The Arctic char is really red, very deep and rich, and the Inuits, the natives up there, they eat it primarily raw. They freeze it, in food caches and keep it for long periods of time. And that's the food caches. That's what these little stones are. Is they mark their food caches with a stone, kind of a marker. The curvature of the Earth is about 7 miles, so the Arctic is very, very flat. So if you build something up, it means you can see it from just a lot further away. So they build these, what are called a nukshucks, just stacked up rocks. And they were usually a road marker or a major turning point of how you get from point A to point B, or over the top of a food cache, because it's permafrost, right? So all you got to do is dig down about 3 feet, and it's solid ice. So they set their food on that, stack it back over with rocks so that the critters don't come and get it, and then they could, when next time they came back around, they could find that. And then the other lot of fishing I do is in northwestern Ontario. Lac Seul is where I got that walleye and the northern pike. And then some of the fishing rods are they're steelhead salmon rods. So they're 9, 10, and 11 feet long. So they're really long, and they got a real big butt end, and it goes right to a needle point. So that when you're standing on shore, the rod's real high, and when you're fighting the fish, the rod takes all the fight bending over so that you can bring the fish up alongside you, unhook it. And it also, the longer the rod, the further you can cast. So the little 1 ounce pixies, those little shiny, looks like fake salmon spawn in the middle of it. It's got a single barbless hook, and you just take one of those 10-foot steelhead salmon rods and you can throw it a long ways. Long ways. And then the heavier rods are what we use for lake trout if you jump in a little boat and go do some trolling. This picture right here, we never did. This is almost full size on this lake trout too. A buddy of mine had him hooked, and there's, you can see that pixie that's hooked up. So it's a little bigger than real size, but we never did get this fish up. He had this one on the line, and he gave me a holler and said, "Hey Luke, come on over here, give me a hand." So I went over, and I had my little red camera, and he handed me his fishing rod. So I took my little red camera, and I just did a whole bunch of underwater pictures, and I just happened to get that one. And then as he was trying to get underneath it, and I was holding the rod, the barbless hook came out, and he swam away. So he was, as Lee Subdy said, that fish was this big and that big around. So that's the only picture we got of him. That's a true catch and release. Never even got him up out of the water. We were standing in about 4 feet of water there, and I took about 10 pictures, and that one was perfectly focused, and I got lucky. So it's great. I think the high Arctic is very, very unexplored. When we were up there, the numerous times we've been there, we see very few people. It's not like the TV shows of Alaska tourism and lots of float planes. This camp that we went to on Victoria Island probably only put about 200 to 250 people through a year. So everybody says, well, it must be really expensive. Well, it's similar to going south to the Caribbean and flying a long ways, right, to go sit on a beach. I prefer flying north and stand on a beach and cast for fish. So the little blue highlight, that is the Northwest Passage. All of that we studied when we were in school. So I actually caught a fish right off the edge of the Northwest Passage, a river delta. That's where this big char here came from. Standing on shore again, fishing, throwing as far as you can, and these fish are going up and downstream from the ocean up into fresh water. And the only way to get around up there is airplanes. So you're always flying in a Cessna 205 or a de Havilland Otter. The bigger planes, when they get you in, they're always landing on gravel runways, so the jets are all refit. The jet engines have pitot tubes, blow tubes, that blow out the front of the engine so that rocks don't go into the jet engine, because they're always landing on a gravel runway. And the airplanes have extremely, really quick lift, so you always want to get up in the air as quick as possible. Same as even if you're on water, that de Havilland Otter with the turboprop on it, you could put 6 guys in there and a whole bunch of gear, and it seemed like you'd just pop up like just instant. So it's great country. I highly recommend it. You fly from Winnipeg or Minneapolis, Winnipeg to Edmonton, Edmonton to Yellowknife, Yellowknife to Cambridge Bay was one of our trips, and the other one was from Yellowknife. We flew up 500 miles to Great Bear Lake. Great Bear is I believe it's the 10th largest great clear-water lake in the world. It's similar in size to some of the Great Lakes. I think it's just a little smaller than Superior, but it's a monster lake, and it's full of the great big silver lake trout that they are still doing research on, and they claim that those fish could be 60, 70, 80 years old, because there's very little bacteria in the water, there's no diseases, so they just get, and when you catch one of these, and they're all catch and release, we catch them barbless hooks on these great big, they're a big version of a lazy Ike, and it's got a treble hook on it, but we grind all the barbs off so it's catch and release. And a lake trout can come up out of 80 feet of water and actually can equalize its air bladder so that they can then, they burp the air out on the way up and then they can go back down. So bringing them up out of deep water doesn't kill them, doesn't hurt them. So, but they're really, I mean, when you look at them, they look like a dinosaur. They just look old, and they're a big old, that is not too much more than real size. That's a picture that I took and then measured it and had it mounted on foam core, and I'm waiting for the taxidermist to bring that one back yet. I haven't gotten that one yet. So I have just, that's my foam core, and I cut it out, and that's pretty close to real size. That was about a 50-pound lake trout. Just great big old fish. And Great Bear Lake has ice on it, all except maybe 8 or 9 weeks a year. So the ice comes off in about late June, July, off for July, August, a little bit of September, and then the ice goes back on. The year that we were up there, they found a fishing guide that had gone missing 21 years before that. His body went down, and it took 20 years for Great Bear Lake to push the body back up to a spot where they finally recovered the body. So they knew he was drowned, but they never did find him. And when we got up to camp, they had just, when the ice went out that year, they had gone by where they fished all the time and had recovered the body. So it's very low amount of population in that whole, none of it, Northwest Territory, the Yukon, very few people up there, and very few roads, don't have railroad. An interesting thing where we did fish on the very far end of Great Bear Lake, that's where they got the uranium for the bomb that was dropped on Nagasaki. It came across Great Bear Lake to the bottom end where a train picked it up and brought it, I believe, to Memphis, Tennessee is where the bomb was created. So the uranium came from Great Bear Lake all the way down into the States and part of World War II history. It's great country. They say that Canada has 2 million lakes. And when you fly over that northern part of the Northwest Territory, when you look down, all you see is rivers and lakes and water and streams and just... And the nice thing about flying the small airplanes is you only fly at about 800 to 1,000 feet high, so you can see the ground, you can see animals on the ground, you can see the rivers, and it's great country. I highly recommend it. Nothing against Cancun and the Caribbean, but I'd highly recommend you, if you really like fishing, instead of flying that way, fly north. Fly as far as you can. It's great country.